more horribly than anyone I can imagine, since I was an eyewitness to it. When Jim Garrison said there were 3 teams of shooters in Dealey Plaza, George, and we were getting ready to do the story, and then at midnight he goes into the editing room and he changes it around, because at one point I asked Mr. Garrison, how many people do you think really knew he would die in Dealey Plaza? And he said, well, John, it started in 63 after the Bay of Pigs. And so he says there are 3 teams of shooters. They're probably 3 men in a team because it's their most important kill, so they have a radio man. And he goes down the line, and all of a sudden he says, about 30. So anyway, when this airs in a show called Speak Up America, produced by George Slaughter, he has taken my field producer down into the editing room, and he re-edited my story so that when Marjorie Gortner, the host of this particular show, Speak Up America, asked Mr. Garrison how many shooters there were in Dealey Plaza, Slaughter cuts to Jim Garrison and he says about 30. Then he calls me on the phone, says, what do you think? And I'm screaming at him, how could you malign Mr. Garrison? How could you malign him? So I slammed on the phone. I called Mr. Garrison in New Orleans, and tears were running down my face. And I said, I accidentally recorded him on a recorder. You can own NBC. You can own George Slaughter. Please file suit. I will be your main witness. I've got it all. And Mr. Garrison said, John, I would never see my family if I went to court every time the media maligned me. I'm used to this. I said, but you're not used to it like this. And I'm sobbing. And he said, John, we love your show. Please, just send us a few Real People t-shirts. And that's what I did. I sent a few Real People t-shirts, and the next day I had lost that show, and America had lost that show. And it was the second time that happened. Okay, so I'm telling you, I've never met a human being or an American as brave as Jim Garrison. Now, I'm going to tell you this quite honestly. If Lee had been a woman, and I loved that woman, I would certainly mourn the loss of her every year. But 364 days a year, I would be going after the killer. Now, we all know that Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey Oswald. It was on television, so Dan Rather can't deny that. We all saw it. That's what I would do. But guess what happened? Somebody had to order Jack Ruby to shoot Lee Harvey Oswald. Nobody asked that question. Walter Cronkite, Huntley Brinkley, none of these people. The Warren Commission never even asked it. Guess who asked it? Jim Garrison asked it. And guess how easy it was to find out who ordered Jack Ruby to kill Lee Harvey Oswald. All he did was he got the phone records of David Ferry and Clay Shaw and all of these people, and guess what it led to? It led to a hotel room in Chicago. It was a room where a lady lived who was the mistress of a guy named Lawrence B. Myers. Now, Lawrence B. Myers' son is in military intelligence and in Dallas that day. It is one of the testimonies that you can see in the fictitious war report. Lawrence B. Myers, he admits he's at the Campania Hotel talking to Jack Ruby, but he says he didn't order him to shoot him. When Jim Garrison knew very well. Now, how many times did you read about these things that Jim discovered? You never read about any of those things that Jim discovered. Jim Garrison, in 1967, solved this case. And as a result of Oliver Stone's wonderful movie, the Records Act was forced to be passed because hundreds of thousands of people demanded, after the success of Oliver's film, the justifiable success of that film, that these records be released. There's a 1967 memo, which is in the movie, that wasn't released until the Records Act was passed. And it says, we must help Clay Shaw, otherwise Jim Garrison is going to get a conviction for conspiracy. And I would urge you to stick around later and listen to Peter Janney, because his father signed that memo. Peter wrote a brilliant book called Mary's Mosaic, a terribly good book, and he's a wonderful speaker, and I would suggest you stick around and listen to Peter. But I'm going to tell you again how thorough Jim Garrison was. He did not just investigate Glayshaw and David Ferrie and all these CIA renegades. He went back to investigate the origins of the Central Intelligence Agency, founded in 1947 by Harry Truman, signed into law by Harry Truman. And the purpose of this, Jim says, is to control American foreign policy. Are you telling me I only have 10 minutes left? I am very sorry. Okay, I'm going to get to the end of this and say this very quickly. It was not drawn by an intelligence man or a military man. It was drawn up by a Wall Street lawyer named James Forrestal. James Forrestal began to complain about America's foreign policy because there was no reason for a fake Cold War against the Soviet Union, because American capitalism would have been crushed if there was no fake war, because American capitalism was, and the military-industrial complex about which that coward Eisenhower warned us about, he was a general. He could have done something as president. He left this carnage to a 43-year-old young man. He had no chance against these people. Okay? Capitalism would have collapsed. It was only saved by the Depression. Okay, now, James Forrestal is now saying, hey, we don't need this fake war. They lost 20 million people. And why is it that Israel is now having so much influence over our foreign policy? All of a sudden, they get together and they say, James Forrestal is nuts. And what do? They send him to the insane ward of Bethesda Naval Hospital, and on May 5th, he jumps out of the 16th floor window, supposedly committing suicide. Ironically, the hospital where they prevented an autopsy of President John Kennedy. And one of the doctors, Dr. Fake, who was called as a defense attorney in the trial, testifies why they were prevented from doing the autopsy by a bunch of generals led by Curtis LeMay. It is all in the documentary. So I'm going to say something. The CIA created Project Mockingbird to infiltrate every media in the country. The worst for CBS, NBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post. They still infest everything. CIA, cockroaches in action. Now I am telling you, if they can infect the big birds, they can infect the assassination sites. Because when the CIA plans a killing, they also plan containment. Why are there 12 assassination sites? They didn't kill a dozen presidents. They only killed one. Jim Garrison should have only one assassination site. There should only be one in this country. He solved the case. You follow him to the killers and those people in the media who protected them. You will clear Lee Harvey Oswald and everybody else they're blaming for this. It is that simple. Now, what has happened since then, because of Jim Garrison's appearance on The Tonight Show and Late Night, he says very publicly, a branch of the Central Intelligence Agency killed our president. They heard that and they said, we don't want truth anymore. So along went the fairness doctrine, along went equal time. You won't hear those kind of truths anymore because you have no more voice in America. All you have left are your feet. And I hope you use them. Now, I'm going to have to skip to the end of my speech, unfortunately, because I had a lot of brilliant, informative things to tell you. So, what can I do as one individual? I can't do much. I don't have a hit show anymore. I'm not rich and famous anymore. But I can do what Jim Garrison, John Kennedy, and Thomas Jefferson urged us to do. The most intellectual president the United States ever had, followed by John Kennedy. John Kennedy was a peace president. They ordered us to speak up and seek redress of grievances. And this is how this documentary ends. One of the bravest people I ever met in my life, aside from Jim Garrison, is my co-producer in the film. Her name is Myra Bronstein. Myra is sitting right up over here. I would ask her to stand, but I don't want her to think she's a target. Anyway, what we did is we designed this 10 Most Wanted poster because on September 5th, 1981, Jim Garrison said, John, there are a lot of people walking around who should be arrested right now for the murder of John Kennedy. He gave me names, they're all dead. But today there are still people walking around who should be put under oath and questioned about the murder of John Kennedy. So what Myra and I did is we did what the Constitution and a few great men urged us to do, seek redress of grievances. This is a 10 Most Wanted poster. You can see around the edges there are dozens of people that you can recognize, but they're all dead. But these other 10 are alive. It says, wanted for questioning and or waterboarding for the crime of obstruction of justice and the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I will read you the 4 names. I delivered this at the end of the film to the Justice Department by myself. Dan Rather, who ordered him to lie to us about the direction that John Kennedy's head went when the bullet struck. The second one is Bill Moyers. After a rainy morning, this man who was Lyndon Johnson's closest aide who orders the bubble top removed. I have offered him since 1992 when I made the Garrison tapes. I offered Dan Rather since 1992 my last $25,000 for 5 minutes with them to ask them these questions and have been turned down. That's $5,000 a minute. And they all turned me down. Third is George Bush, who is fortunately for us still alive. He is the one man I know of who can't remember he was in Dallas on November 22nd, even though there were photographs proving it. He sent a memo saying a guy named Murat was going to murder John Kennedy. And J. Edgar Hoover says, hey, we just got a memo from a CIA guy, George Bush. Okay? Zapata was the name of his oil company. It was the name of the code name for Operation Bay of Pigs. He was the head of the CIA and president of the United States. How despicable that the head of our secret police becomes our president and nobody utters a word about it. Had it been in Russia as it was with Putin, we hear about it day and night. And last, but not least, is Barack Obama. Woo. As the holder of the highest office in a democracy, he is the lead one to pursue the law, pursue the Constitution of the United States. The House Select Committee turned over to the Justice Department all of their files, urging them to continue, well, urging might be a strong word, suggesting. Anyway, put it in the cold case file, and if you get around to it, look into it. For Barack Obama not to pursue the law further in order that open is dereliction of duty. And he has a pen and a piece of paper like George Bush has, okay? He can sign executive orders like he does when he sends a drone overseas to kill a 16-year-old innocent boy. Why does he not sign an executive order demanding the release of all these files so we can see what this country has done to the president, has done to our democracy, and done to us? The last thing, we open the movie with a quote from John Kennedy, and I will close. This is at the bottom of this folder, which you will be, this is the first time anybody has seen it. That's one of the other reasons that I am here. At the bottom, John Kennedy said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. I want to thank you for letting me almost finish my speech. I am truly honored that you're here. I'm pleased there are so many people interested in this case, and especially in Jim Garrison. I wish you luck. I wish the country luck, because we need it.
By the way, again, there will be a question and answer with John Barbour at the Texas Theater on Monday afternoon. I didn't put this in my opening remarks to John, but you probably figured it out. He started his career off as a comedy writer. And the other thing that I will say is, last year I spoke at another conference, and I had the misfortune of following up some guy you might know by the name of Jim Mars. So here's one of the top 5 guys in the assassination community, and my sorry ass has to follow him up. So now I just walked over to Jim a little bit ago and I said, now you're going to see what it feels like to follow up somebody else. Guys, his book, Crossfire, was, along with Jim Garrett's books that Oliver Stone used for the movie JFK. The man is absolutely incredible. If you haven't seen the first Jim Garrison tapes that John Barbour has, go to the last word on the assassination. He has an hour-and-a-half conversation with Jim Mars, with Joan Mellon, with